Welcome to the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast. Today we are chatting about mindfulness in the bar exam and how it can help you handle bar exam stress. Your Bar Exam Toolbox hosts are Alison Monahan and Lee Burgess. That's me. We're here to demystify the bar exam experience so you can study effectively, stay sane, and hopefully pass and move on with your life. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. Alison also runs the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review on your favorite listening app and check out our sister podcast, the Law School Toolbox podcast. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can reach us via the contact form on barexamtoolbox.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's get started.
Welcome back. Well, if there's one word that seems to go with bar study, it is stress. I mean, maybe anxiety too. But most people would agree the bar exam is stressful.
Yeah.
So over the years of working with students, we have become more and more passionate about the idea that mindfulness and that type of thing can actually help you perform your best. So mindfulness is a pretty common buzzword these days, but the reason it's popular is that for a lot of people, it actually works.
Yes.
So Lee, you've actually done some lawyer-focused mindfulness, is that right?
I have. So a few years back, I did some mindfulness in the law coursework with our friend Judy Cohen, who runs an organization called Warrior One, which has been doing, she's been doing mindfulness in the law work for a long time before it became super popular. But she offers these courses where she talks about how you can incorporate mindfulness into your legal practice, both to not only have some elements of self-care, but also be a better lawyer. And I think one of the great examples she uses in this context, and then we'll get back to the bar, is how the practice of law has changed, where we have to implement more of this mindfulness. So she said, one of the stories that I found really compelling is she talks about like getting a nasty letter from opposing counsel. And she's like, at the beginning of her practice, she'd get the nasty letter and you get the letter and you're angry. And maybe you either dictate or you type up a letter and you're angry. And then it goes to your assistant and your assistant maybe formats that letter and cleans it up and checks for typos and then puts it on letterhead and then sends it back to you and you have to reread it.
Right. And then you say,
then you sign it.
Do I want to send this
right,
nasty girl?
And then by that point, it's like been a day or two and maybe you're not, and maybe you toss it in the trash and start over. But this is very different than our current world of like emails and voicemails and text messages and all of this stuff where, I know that I get like an angry voicemail or something and then you're just like, I'm going to call this person right back.
Yeah, I would never listen to my voicemail.
Well, I don't ever listen. I know. Better text messages or emails. I'd never listen to my voicemail either.
Yeah, the nasty text or nasty email, and you immediately start typing something back. You're not thinking, and your brain is basically offline.
Yeah.
And your reaction is probably not going to be helpful. It's going to escalate the conflict. I think definitely that mindfulness is the idea of kind of taking that pause.
Yeah. And so I did that kind of work around the legal stuff. And then you and I have both done yoga, which is probably where I got introduced to this idea of mindfulness. And then I did mindfulness training around childbirth, which is actually, there's some really interesting work being done of how being present and really being in your body and being able to control pain and things like that can all be done through mindfulness exercises.
Yeah, I mean, in law school, I kind of randomly picked up a book by Pema Chandran. I really have no idea how I even found it, but somehow it found its way to me. And I was having really, really chronic insomnia problems. I mean, I wasn't sleeping. It was terrible. And so I picked this book up. I think it was called The Places That Scare You, which is an introduction to a Buddhist practice called Tonglen meditation. And I just found it so soothing and just read it over and over again. So I would finish it and I would just start it the next night and keep reading it over and over again.
Yeah.
And I felt like it really started to help, it kind of sinks in. And one of the things she talks about there, which is, I think the origin of Judy's name of Warrior One, is that, you do this training for the moments that you need it. You can't kind of show up in a stressful moment, like studying for the bar or like, having an essay question that you don't know anything about. That's not the time that you can start really developing this. I mean, it's called a practice for a reason.
Right.
So, we have some curriculum we've developed from a friend of yours actually around specifically to the bar.
Yeah.
But there are lots of great resources out there if it's something you're interested in. I mean, one of the things I did too was a guided meditation when I had a surgery. So a friend of mine who has a breast cancer survivor sent me this meditation, and the first time I listened to it, I fell apart. because they're taking you through the operating room and like you're there and like all these things are happening. I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. I'm like, I don't care about the angel on my shoulder. Like they're cutting me open. But then, the second or third time I listened to it, it was very calming to the point that I just listened to it over and over again. Repetition seems to be a theme for me. And I actually like went into the pre-surgery area and took a nap. And the nurse came at some point and woke me up and was like, that's really unusual. People are not usually like relaxed and sleeping. Before I was like, oh yeah, I've got this meditation on. It's so relaxing. She's like, wow, we should give that to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at various points, I think we've both found that this type of work can really be called on to help you through challenging situations. And what we have seen with our students is for a lot of folks, implementing this type of practice into your study can help with, we're going to talk for a minute about why we think it's so important. But, if you struggle with focus, anxiety, you're just trying to clear your head in the morning, or even in the exam room, if you start to feel the panic, if you've got some of these tools that you've practiced, you can call on them. So,
and there's a lot of neuroscience behind this.
Oh, there is. There's a ton of science that we won't bore you with. But if you think that this sounds like, a crock of bull, you can go on the internet and the internet will tell you why this stuff is so important.
Right. Or you can go listen to our podcast. I think it was in the Law School Toolbox about Mindsight, which is a book by a psychiatrist and about the neuroscience of all of this. So,
Dan Siegel.
Yeah, Dan Siegel. He's great.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, there's, it's not just sort of like woo-woo stuff. It actually, even the military uses it.
Yep. Okay. So why you should try and give mindfulness a shot. Well, one, there are tons of different methods. And I think that this is something that a lot of folks don't know about. You can do sitting meditations, walking meditations, yoga, eating meditations, you name it. And if you try some of these, I think you might find that some really work better for you than others. I like a good walking meditation myself because I think that it can be nice to be in silence. I think one of the things that I really notice in life, and maybe this is because I also have small children, but very seldom is stuff quiet. Either you've got music on or you're working or maybe you have the TV on or you're listening to a podcast. Or I remember one day I was driving somewhere and the car was completely silent. And I was like, wow. It was really refreshing. It was like my brain was just amazed. And so I think even when you're doing things like walking or standing in line or eating, you can take a moment and say, like, what if I just thought about this one thing or noticed this one thing? And it can be very refreshing for your brain.
Yeah, I think the point that there are a lot of different options is great because sometimes when people say mindfulness, you just think like, oh, I have to sit on this cushion and like do nothing for 45 minutes. Like, A, I don't have time for that. B, I don't want to do that. C, like I'm bad at it. All these things that everybody thinks. But you can also, there are lots of options. There are things that are more or less structured. I went on like a hike, like an urban hike where we did like various meditation things at different points, which was kind of interesting. For me, I think like the yoga piece is really useful. The whole idea of yoga and some level, like the physical aspect of it was really to prepare people's minds for like more of the meditation part. So if you are like very in your head and that kind of thing, I think, you don't have to just sit on the cushion and like think that something's going to happen. It's fine if you want to try that, but there are other options that might work better. Or guided meditations, I think, work well for a lot of people. Yeah.
And I did yoga this morning, and I'll be honest, I've got a lot on my to-do list, and I did not do my Savasana very well. I was trying, but it was definitely one of those where it was fascinating to watch where my busy brain was like going to, and then how long it took you to realize that you were thinking about something. And then I was like, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing right now. It was like, I'm going to go back to the breath. And then it was like, zing, I'm going to think about something else. And I was like, nope. But it's all about kind of meeting yourself where you are. And I probably needed that Savasana a lot more than I do some other days where I can keep my mind a little more quiet.
Well, and I think, in terms of studying, particularly I think the lawyer kind of mindset, I think getting out of that idea of like it has to be perfect, like you have to be the perfect meditator or it's not worth doing, it can actually be really useful.
Yep. Okay, so other reasons why you should give this a try is it definitely helps to increase focus, which in the studying realm, that's a good thing because a lot of people do struggle with focus. And we have seen this, especially with students who have attention deficit issues, that this can be very effective. I've even had students do mindfulness meditations in the exam room to help refocus their minds. So,
I think, I can imagine definitely in the middle of, 100 set of MBE questions, every 30 questions, just take 30 seconds or a minute, do some breathing exercises, like refocus. That could be very helpful.
Oh, yeah, because I got really tired in one of my sets and I was definitely struggling, pulling my act back together. And I did not have this skill set back when I sat for the bar. And I think it would have been really helpful.
Right. And I think for test anxiety as well.
Oh, yeah, which is so common. And I think, if you have, I think if you're struggling with anxiety, oftentimes that anxiety does appear while you're doing some practice. And so if you've been practicing these approaches, you can say, I'm going to do this breathing exercises when I start to feel, the anxious belly or whatever it is your physical response to that anxiety. And so being able to do that in your study time then allows you to take that into the exam room. And when those feelings inevitably start to come up, you have something to do that's proactive and kind of engage yourself in a different way.
Yeah, these are just really tools. So, whatever your personal issues are, and most people have some of them,
Right.
Do you go on like stress? Do you get unfocused? Is it an anxiety issue? I think just having that skill set and those tools that you practice, so you're like, okay, I can identify what's happening or what's getting ready to happen. And then I can kind of short circuit that spiral of downwardness that's getting ready to occur here.
Exactly. Other things mindfulness can do, and science has, told us about this, it can be easier to be content and are happy. And I think that, who doesn't need more happiness in their lives? It can also help with gratitude meditations, where you discuss what you're thankful for every day. It can be very helpful. And that there's a lot of science behind the fact that it can improve physical health. It can lower blood pressure, improve your sleep and things like that. I get very anxious at medical doctors' offices, and I use mindfulness breathing techniques to push my blood pressure back down. It's pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah. They've done some crazy stuff with like meditating monks who can raise their body temperature if they're sitting in the snow and all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, the sleep thing is really key. Like I would sometimes go in the evening to it's like relaxation yoga. They don't call it that, but restorative yoga and Reiki class. And it's just like you come out of that and after an hour, you're just like melting into the ground. Yeah. And I think, for people who are studying in a stressful situation, that can be really critical just to have that tool to basically like let yourself relax and sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember once I was doing acupuncture, and I find acupuncture is also a meditative thing because you end up lying on this table for 20 minutes or whatever. And she was like, I feel that there's some stuff going on in your back, so I'm going to do some points that I usually do. And it was like she put some points, and I like laid down, and then I got up 20 minutes later, and I felt drunk. Like, I don't know what she found in my body that needed to be moved out, but I remember being like, I don't think I should drive. I took a walk. I went and got lunch. I'm like, I was having trouble focusing my eyes. Like, it was pretty amazing. But I had also like kind of dropped into this very kind of like sleepy state while I was on the table. And like, it's kind of amazing what can happen to you when you kind of practice this stuff.
Yeah. And it's not always totally positive. I remember the first time I ever did acupuncture for some physical thing that, it was basically like, okay, whatever else we're doing is not working. Why don't you try acupuncture? And so I went, and I was kind of skeptical. I was like, okay, whatever, I'll try it. And, I was like, okay, that was kind of interesting. Like, seemed to help my shoulder a little bit. And I remember I walked outside, and I was walking to the bus stop, and I got this like really paranoid feeling. And I mentioned it to the acupuncturist the next time I saw him. I was like, yeah, this is a really weird thing. He's like, oh, I didn't tell you. Yeah, you have to like, put your chi back up before you go outside. Like you were too relaxed. And I was like, oh. He's like, oh yeah, you were like too open. Next time, like you got to put those defenses back up before you walk down the street. And I was like, oh, okay. He's
that
like,
would have been helpful.
He's like, it's a thing.
It's funny. So in the bar exam context, we recommend mindfulness exercises to help you with forgiveness, especially if you've failed before, procrastination, worry, anxiety, and sleep. So I wanted today to walk through a couple of common mindfulness exercises if you want to kind of try some things out. So let's start with just a basic mindfulness meditation, which is really where you sit quietly, often in a chair, and focus on your breath. Some people like to choose a word and repeat it, or a mantra, or you can just focus on breathing in and out. It's actually pretty hard to just focus on breathing in and out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it seems like, oh gosh, that would be so trivial, but you hardly ever actually really think about your breath. It just happens.
Yeah.
And as a result, like, you're typically, most people, particularly if they're at all stressed, are not really breathing deeply. You're not getting as much oxygen as you might be able to otherwise. But yeah, just kind of, sit there, and if thoughts arise, you can just kind of label them thoughts. Imagine blowing them away.
Yep. And I think that you make a good point with taking deep breaths. I know as we sit here, we've been doing some podcasting for a while.
Cannot breathe.
I know, but you don't really realize how you start to kind of like hunch over. I know we're both kind of like stretching out, but it's like increase my lung capacity. But it's very easy to get kind of hunched over and do the shallow breathing, and then your shoulders get tense. And, taking that moment to be really aware can change not only how your physical body is functioning, but also your mind, because it turns out your brain needs quite a bit of oxygen to be able to function at its best.
Right. And, in a test, if you're feeling like, oh, I'm so tired, my brain isn't really working quite right, just getting a few deep breaths can sometimes help shift that a little bit.
For sure. So there are also guided meditations, which a lot of people find helpful, especially if just focusing on the breath is not really working for you. One of the most popular apps that you can use is called Headspace, and that allows you, I think you can select, I haven't used it in a long time, but you can select all sorts of different meditations, and it just kind of talks you through it. You put on headphones, you can sit on the floor. But a lot of people find that, it can help to have somebody talk you through things. We've also found that there are sometimes meditations for very specific things. So when we developed our mindfulness curriculum for our bar students, there's one specifically for like, if you're finding it hard to focus and you're procrastinating, try this, and right. So it's like, try doing this, you're petting your hand and you're talking about, giving yourself love and kindness and, thinking of your future self and whatever it might be. But there are guided meditations that can help you kind of focus in on what you need to do, or not really what you need to do, but what you need to get over to become productive again.
Yeah, and I think, there a lot of it's going to come down to, do you like the sound of this person's voice?
Yeah,
is what
true.
They're saying annoying to you?
Yeah.
So if you, go on Headspace or Calm or one of these other ones, or even just the internet, some people's voices, you're going to want to listen to them forever. And then some people, you're like, wow, that is like nails on a chalkboard to me.
So don't listen to those people.
No, but, I'm sure you can find someone that would be great for you to listen to.
Yep. Body scans are also something that we've read a lot about. This is something that Dan Siegel talks about in his books, where you kind of start usually at your toes, but you notice subtle bodily sensations without judgment and let them pass. And so you kind of start at one end of your body and you work your way to the other end. A lot of people do this to ready for bed. They lay in bed and they do a body scan to kind of just create awareness and create calm. But a lot of people can also do this when they're just trying to figure out what's going on, especially if you have a sudden, moment of anxiety or tension. It can be like, well, where is that tension?
Right.
What's going on?
Yeah, and a lot of people who end up in law school and are very cerebral, and this is part of the Dan Siegel book too, but also a lot of other people like Martha Beck has written about this in her Finding Your North Star book, have kind of lost that connection with the body. And so in a way, you're not getting that information. And so, even when you're studying, that can actually be valuable information that you're basically repressing. So if you can become more kind of aware of like what your body is telling you, you might start to notice like, oh, I'm getting fatigued. Oh, I need to eat. Rather than just kind of being like, this is not going well and I don't know why.
Right. I don't like how I feel.
I don't like how I feel.
Right.
And I'm upset about studying for this test and it's going to go badly and I'm going to fail. And then, then you're down that rabbit hole of like, I'm going to fail the test and nobody can tell me I'm not going to, when really actually you just needed a snack.
Yep. I think another thing a lot of people can try out is sensory meditations, where you focus on listening to sounds or how things feel on your skin. I think that, sitting, especially if you can go outside and, we live in a city, so, sensory meditations, it's maybe different than if you go outside.
Well, I did an interesting one in this urban hike. They did one where what he asked us to do, and he made the point, you can really do this anywhere, literally even just sitting in a boring conference room or sitting in the bar exam, maybe waiting for the test to start or something when you're starting to feel like maybe panicked and you want to kind of, stop that. He just asked people to notice we did it, I think, with sound and with visually. What is the furthest thing away that you can hear right now?
Oh, that's kind
and
of
so you just sit for like, a few seconds and sometimes say, well, what is is this other sound farther away than that?
Huh.
And the same thing with the image, what is the most distant thing you can see right at this second?
Interesting.
Yeah, and you can kind of do it anywhere, so simple. And it really does, it completely flips your brain from that, like, oh my gosh, like, things aren't going well, I'm getting ready to take the bar, I'm going to fail, blah, blah, just like, oh, what do I hear? Like, oh, is that a hum of an air conditioner? Oh, no, outside now I think I hear like, someone's dog barking or whatever. I mean, you've got time to kill.
Yeah.
Before the exam starts, you may as well have something to do that's going to distract your brain.
I can hear somebody drinking from the drinking fountain. I can hear somebody flush the toilet. I can hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like that interesting usually, but it does something interesting to your brain if you try it out.
Yeah. Another one that I have found interesting to put into practice is love and kindness meditations, which is something that we talked about in our Mindfulness for Lawyers curriculum, but this idea of, how your energy and the energy around you can shift if you just offer up love and kindness to people that you are meeting. So I think it would be interesting to walk into the bar exam and wish love and kindness to every person that you saw. This
is the like kind of Tonglen meditation practice, is you kind of take in the negative energy and like send out positive, and you start with someone very close to you and gradually expand it to the entire room and then expand it to the entire universe. But yeah, you could definitely, that would be a great practice to do. And like, as you're sitting there and they're rustling around and people are coming in and you're just like, I'm breathing in their stress and I'm just sending out love and kindness.
Exactly.
I hope that everyone passes the exam.
Exactly. Or, if you're studying in a law library and you can kind of feel the anxiety in the room, you can just, do the same thing as you're walking to, whatever table you're planning to study at. Breathe in their stress, breathe out love and kindness, give them good wishes, and it changes your energy as well. Yeah. I think eating meditations are interesting and are something that we all have to do every day. So this is like, if you don't have time to meditate,
right, do it over lunch.
Well,
and I think a lot of times people, they're like studying over lunch or they're looking on their phone and they're getting stressed out. And that's just not great for your digestion. You can take that 10 minutes and just really focus on what you're doing. And it's probably going to reset your brain and help you out later in the day.
Yeah. So like, chewing the food extra times, thinking how it tastes, how it feels. I mean, it's similar to what you were talking about with the sound, trying to hear different things. You're just trying to take a few moments and really experience eating, which is different than typically what most of us do, which is shove food in our face.
Yeah. And sometimes literally, like if you'd ask me 5 minutes later what I ate for lunch, I would have to be like, what did I eat for lunch? Like you're totally not there. You're really almost not even having the experience.
Yeah. We both talked about how we've done yoga, and I think yoga can be one of those things that can be a helpful way to introduce these practices. And you can find your yoga jam. Like,
again, there are lots and lots of different options.
There are lots of different options. I have done a lot of them, and they have spoken to me at different points in my life. There was a younger version of me that did a lot of Bikram yoga when I was very intense. And there's been part of me who likes to go to yoga where they play music. So I have kind of like a different sensory reaction. I've done, yoga outside, inside, long yoga classes, short yoga classes, yoga online, like you name it. But you can find something that, can speak to you and meet you where you are.
Yeah, I've started sometimes going to one that's bilingual.
Oh,
so it's
that's
called
fun.
Yogamos.
Yogamos, I like it.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because she does like half the class in Spanish. So I'm like, practicing my Spanish and my yoga. This is great. And that class, for example, is actually completely free to anyone in the community who wants to show up. So you do not think that you have to spend a lot of money on this.
Yeah, that's true. And yoga is one of those things. There's often some sort of community yoga. If you live in an urban area.
Pay what you can, or even online. I mean, I did some online classes sometimes. And
it's like $15 a month or something like that. Or even, I'm sure there are some on YouTube that you can just get for free. One that I always like to encourage people to try is tactical breathing exercises.
You love this one.
I do love this one because
snipers.
I know because I love talking about the snipers. But when I really started researching this like years ago, I found out that snipers use what they call tactical breathing exercises, which is just a simple breath exercise to calm their nerves. And so their hands won't shake. And this is a very simple exercise. You breathe in for 4 counts, you hold the breath for 4 counts, and you breathe out for 4 counts. And you do it again. And you hold.
Yeah, I've also heard this referred to as box breathing because you can kind of imagine in your brain, like you're breathing in, there's a line, you're holding, it goes across, you breathe out, it goes down, you hold, it goes back to start. So you're making like a little rectangle.
Yeah, you can always use that visual, which is also another meditative thing. But this can be so effective. And that's 16 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, if you did a few of these, if you're starting to freak out in the exam, I feel like that would be 30 seconds really well spent.
Yep. So But
being a sniper is stressful.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, if you do have this practice, like when things just all of a sudden make you angry around the world, sometimes I do this. Like somebody cuts me off and then I'm like, I'm going to do some tactical breathing,
Well, because what happens, is literally in those situations when you get flooded with a cortisol reaction, your brain has just gone offline.
Mm-hmm.
You are now on sometimes you'll hear therapists or whatever refer to as like you're operating on brainstem right
Mm-hmm.
now. Your reactions are the reactions of like a lizard without a very developed frontal cortex.
Yep.
So you've got to do something to get that like more highly evolved part of our human brain back online and functioning. And the way to do that is really physical.
Yep.
You can't like talk yourself back into it because you've like literally lost your mind at that point.
Yeah, Dan Siegel calls it flipping your lid because your upstairs brain
is just gone.
It's just gone. Poof. And it's your job to like engage it to bring it back.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you got to just do this stuff. And sometimes I'll even be shocked at how angry I can get about something very silly. But, as we all do. But if you can just calm yourself down, it's not a big deal that you got angry. It's only a big deal that you stay angry. Or it's not a big deal that you got anxious. It's only a big deal if you stay anxious, and it's going to prevent you from being effective.
Right. And most things, you don't actually need to be perfect at this to get the benefits. So this is a practice and you will get better at it probably over time. And there will be times when you are really bad at it. Mm-hmm. And, even in that moment, even if you're thinking about like, okay, I understand I've just flipped my lid and I'm about to go totally crazy and there's nothing I can do about it, but at least you recognized it.
Yeah. Before we finish up, the one I should have added to that list that I didn't were visualizations, because you were talking about that with your surgery guided meditation, that you were doing a visualization. And, we incorporated this into our mindfulness exam prep curriculum, but I think this idea of walking yourself through the experience is very important.
I think particularly for people with anxiety. Mm-hmm. I think the more you can kind of have had that experience beforehand and have even played with different ways to react to pieces of it, when the experience itself happens, you're going to feel typically less anxious about the whole scenario.
Yep. So the reality is, if you've never tried this before and you think it sounds daunting to create a new habit, don't be daunted. Because
just get Headspace.
Just get Headspace and try it. You can create new habits.
Go to yoga,
Yeah, depends on, what you read and who you believe. But generally, I think it's pretty accepted. It takes 21 to 66 days to create a new habit. So that's definitely the amount of time you'll likely be studying for the bar. It's probably much shorter. And so mindfulness doesn't have to be a huge commitment. You can fold it into your bar prep. Really, it can be 5 minutes or 45 minutes a day. It doesn't really matter, but any is better than none.
Oh, yeah. When I was doing my prep for California, I went to yoga twice a day, and it was great.
Yeah.
Got an unlimited package. They really lost money on that.
Yeah. And I think, my friend who wrote our mindfulness curriculum always used to joke, if I don't have 5 minutes to meditate a day, I meditate for 10.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like if you literally cannot find 5 minutes to be nice to yourself, you probably need more than 5 minutes.
And you can also, you can multitask, do it in the shower.
Yeah, do it while you're waiting.
Or like really focus on your shower, and that is the meditation.
Exactly. Hey, just be in silence. That's my new favorite meditation. Okay, well, any final thoughts before we are kind of out of time?
No, I think, it's normal to be kind of skeptical about a lot of these things. I was definitely skeptical for a very long time to try, acupuncture or even yoga or anything, certainly meditation. But the reality is, these are practices that have been around with humans for thousands of years, and there is a reason for that. They actually work.
Yep, that's true. So you can always, start small, download something, and go from there. All right, well, good luck with trying to find your own personal mindfulness practice.
Yeah, your Zen bar
study.
Your
Zen bar study. All right. Well, before we go, I want to take a second to remind you to check out our blog at barexamtoolbox.com, which is full of helpful tips to help you prepare and stay sane as you study for the bar exam. We have a lot of material on there about mindfulness in the bar.
Including some yoga poses for the bar with pictures.
Oh, yes.
Thank you to one of our tutors for posing for those.
Exactly. So take a few minutes and take a study break, and you can dive into some of that material and see what speaks to you. You can also find information on our website about our courses, tools, and one-on-one tutoring programs to support you as you study for the UBE or California bar exam. If you enjoyed this episode of the Bar Exam Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review and rating on your favorite listening app. We'd really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you're still in law school, you might also like to check out our popular Law School Toolbox podcast as well. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Alison at lee@barexamtoolbox.com or Alison@barexamtoolbox.com, or you can always contact us on our website contact form at barexamtoolbox.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.